Revenge Office Stories. We've decided to go in a different direction. Your contributions are no longer required. Those were the exact words my boss, Richard, used to fire me from the $10 million company I built for him from scratch. He sat there in a leather chair I'd picked out in the corner office with the view I'd negotiated the lease for, and looked at me like I was nothing more than a disposable 45-year-old cog in his machine. What he didn't realize, what his greed completely blinded him to, was that the architect is the only one who knows where the load-bearing walls are, the only one who knows which pillar, if you pull it out, will bring the whole thing crashing down. Before I tell you exactly how I brought his empire down, brick by brick, make sure you subscribe, because this is a masterclass in why you never, ever underestimate the person holding the blueprints. It all started 12 years ago. I wasn't some bright-eyed college grad. I was 33, already a seasoned operations manager with a decade of experience, and honestly, pretty cynical about the whole corporate game. Richard came to me with an idea. He had a little seed money from an inheritance and a big vision for a niche logistics company. What he didn't have was a plan, a system, or a clue about how to turn that cash into an actual business. He had the what and I had the how. He offered me a modest salary and a vague promise of a piece of the pie someday. Against my better judgment, I said yes. I saw a challenge, a blank canvas. I saw a chance to build something from the ground up, the right way. For the first 2 years, we worked out of a cramped, windowless office that always smelled a little like burnt coffee. I was the first one in, last one out. I wasn't just an employee. I was the engine, the skeleton, an entire nervous system of the operation. I designed our proprietary client management software from the ground up, creating a system so efficient it became our single biggest advantage. Richard couldn't understand a line of the code, but he sure loved telling clients it was a system. I was the one who flew to Germany to land our first international shipping partner, dusting off my rusty college German to build a relationship that became the backbone of our European business. I remember being so nervous sitting across from these stern-faced executives while Richard was back home playing golf and taking credit for the aggressive expansion strategy he'd read about in some in-flight magazine. I personally hired our first 50 employees. I didn't look for drones. I looked for people like me, smart, dedicated, and maybe a little underestimated. I built a team that felt more like a family, a tight-knit crew that believed in what we were doing. I created a culture of loyalty, not with cheesy motivational posters, but by being in the trenches with them, by remembering their kids' names, and by fighting for their raises. Morale was through the roof because people knew they were valued. Richard just saw them as numbers on a spreadsheet. Year after year, I was the architect. When we needed to scale up, I designed the workflows. When we hit a cash flow crisis in year 5, I was the one who delicately restructured our finances to keep us from going under, a feat Richard dismissed as housekeeping. He was the face of the company, the guy in the magazines, the one accepting the awards. I was the foundation, silent and unseen, holding the entire thing up. And it worked. My systems, my team, my strategies, they all worked. We grew from a 2-person long shot into a powerhouse. We hit $1 million in revenue, then 5. Richard's promises about that piece of the pie got quieter and quieter. First, it was, once we're stable, Sarah. Then, once we hit 5 million, the goalposts kept moving. The big talk about my share never happened. Instead, he bought a new boat, then a vacation home. My salary went up, sure, but it was a drop in the bucket compared to the value I was creating. It was painfully obvious the pie was all his. Then we hit the big one, $10 million in annual revenue. A goal I had set, a mountain I had mapped our entire path up. The day the numbers came in, I felt this deep, bone-weary sense of accomplishment. We'd done it. I had done it. I walked into Richard's office expecting, just for once, some real acknowledgement. Maybe a bottle of champagne. Maybe, finally, a real conversation about my equity. He was on the phone, laughing. He waved me in and pointed to a chair. "Yeah, the numbers are fantastic," he boomed into the receiver. The strategies I've put in place are really paying off. My stomach dropped. He hung up and swiveled in his chair, a smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, he started, his voice shifting into that slick, corporate drone speak he used when he was about to do something dirty. We've had an incredible run. He started rambling about the market, about new paradigms, about needing a different kind of leadership for the next phase. It was all meaningless jargon, a smokescreen for the real message. And then he said it. We've decided to go in a different direction. I just stared. The shock was a physical blow. It literally knocked the air out of my lungs. $10 million. 12 years of my life. My software. My team. My strategies. All of it leading to this moment of stunning betrayal. Your contributions are no longer required, he finished, like he was canceling a magazine subscription. I asked him why. What did I do wrong? He had no real answer, just more corporate babble about restructuring. The truth was sickeningly simple. The machine I had built was so perfect he thought anyone could run it. He didn't need the expensive architect anymore. He could hire a cheaper building manager. And with me gone, there was no one left with a legitimate claim to a piece of his $10 million pie. He was just cutting his last loose end. I stood up, my legs shaky. I looked around his office, at the awards on the wall I had won, at the framed photo of him on a yacht I had paid for 10 times over. It wasn't just losing a job. It was my life's work for over a decade, and he was erasing me with a casual flick of his wrist. As I walked out, the faces of my team, my asterisk team, looked up confused. I couldn't even say goodbye. Security was already there, a man I'd never seen before, waiting to escort me out. Me, the woman who built the place. It was the ultimate humiliation. That first week was a total blur. It started with just pure shock. I'd wake up and, for a split second, start planning my workday before the crushing weight of it all came crashing back down. It felt less like losing a job and more like a death. A part of me had been amputated without anesthetic. Then the anger hit, a white-hot rage that just consumed me. I'd replay that last conversation with Richard in my head, thinking of everything I should have said. The sheer injustice of it was like a poison. I gave him my loyalty, my best years, my brain, and he tossed me aside like garbage the second I wasn't useful to his bank account. After the anger, a deep, heavy sadness moved in. I was 45. The idea of starting over was terrifying. I'd look at job postings and just feel sick. Who would hire a 45-year-old manager whose last job ended so suddenly? I felt like I had a scarlet letter branded on my forehead. My self-worth, which had been so tied to my work, was in shreds. The loss of purpose of my team, of just having a place to be every day, it left this giant, hollow void. I felt completely alone. For a month, I just drifted. Days in pajamas, staring out the window, feeling totally lost. My drive was gone. The future was just a terrifying fog. I was grieving, not just for a job, but for the person I used to be. Have you ever been made to feel worthless by someone you trusted? Poured your soul into something just to be thrown away? Tell me about it in the comments. It's a horrible feeling, and I think more of us need to talk about it. And if you're getting something out of this story, please give it a like and subscribe. The turning point wasn't some big movie moment. It was slow. It started with a phone call from Mark, my head of sales, a quiet but brilliant guy I'd hired 5 years back. Sarah, he said, his voice tight, it's a complete disaster here. He told me Richard brought in some slick, young replacement who didn't understand our clients, our software, or our culture. This new guy was trying to force a generic sales strategy that was ticking off our biggest partners. Morale had cratered. 2 of our best reps, people I had personally mentored, had already quit. A few days later, another call. Lena, my lead developer. He doesn't get it, she said, completely frustrated. Richard keeps asking for these ridiculous changes to the software. He has no idea how it all connects. The back end is a fortress you built, Sarah. Only you have the blueprints in your head. And that's when it hit me. The aha moment. It wasn't about revenge, not at first. It was just a sudden, cold realization. Richard didn't own a company. He owned a black box. He had no clue how it worked. He thought he was the pilot, but he'd just been a passenger the whole time. I designed the engine, wrote the navigation, and trained the crew. And he had just thrown the only person with the instruction manual out of the plane at 30,000 feet. The business wasn't his empire, it was my machine. And his ignorance was my secret weapon. My sadness turned into a cold, clear focus. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a strategist with a perfect view of the entire battlefield. I wasn't going to just get back on my feet. I was going to prove, in the most undeniable way, what my value really was. My revenge wouldn't be some petty act of sabotage. It would be building something better and just letting his house of cards fall on its own. I opened my laptop, not to look for a job, but to write a business plan. The plan was precise. It was a multi-stage operation to dismantle the business he stole, not by tearing it down, but by making it obsolete. First, I went after the foundation, his clients. My relationships with them were my most valuable asset. I knew their businesses, their goals, their kids' names. Richard only knew their contract value. I didn't call them to trash my old company. That's not my style. I just incorporated my own consulting firm, Nexus Strategic Operations. Then, I updated my professional network profile, announcing my new venture. I didn't have to do anything else. The first call came in 48 hours. It was from our biggest client, a German firm that made up nearly 20% of the company's revenue. The director, Klaus, was a man I'd spent years building trust with. "Sarah," he said, "things are not good. We have delays. Your replacement does not understand our customs needs. What are you doing now?" I calmly explained my new consultancy. 3 days later, I had a contract. I wasn't poaching, I was offering a lifeboat. Over the next 2 months, 5 more of the top 10 clients followed, all with the same stories of chaos and incompetence. Second, I dismantled the walls by draining the talent. As Mark told me, morale was gone. The trust was gone. So I called Mark. I offered him a position, not just as an employee, but as a founding partner with equity. For him, it was a no-brainer. He knew the company's success was tied to a culture that Richard was actively destroying. Mark came with me, and he brought his 2 best salespeople. Then Lena, the lead developer, called me. She was done arguing with a boss who didn't understand his own product. I hired her to build our next-gen software, one we would actually own. Within 6 months, 7 of the most critical people had left Richard's company. Most of them came to work for me. Third, the system I built began to fail on its own. That custom software was the company's crown jewel, but it required my philosophy to run it. I hadn't built any backdoors or kill switches. I didn't have to. I knew that in the wrong hands, the system would tie itself in knots. Without Lena, minor bugs went unfixed. Incompatible updates were pushed. I heard through the grapevine that the entire system went down for 2 full days, costing them hundreds of thousands. The new IT team was trying to solve a puzzle without the picture on the box. Finally, the public facade collapsed. By the end of the first year, my new company, Nexus, wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Meanwhile, Richard's company was gaining a reputation for chaos. Word spreads fast. Competitors started circling, picking off his remaining clients. I started getting invitations to speak at industry conferences about building a resilient, people-first company. I told my story as a case study in leadership. I never mentioned Richard's name. I didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who I was talking about. My success was the ultimate proof of his failure. The end came faster than even I expected. The final blow came from Klaus, the German client. His multi-year, 7-figure contract was up for renewal. He told me Richard flew to Germany to personally beg him to stay, offering massive discounts. But it was too late. The trust was gone. Klaus told him to his face their decision wasn't about price. It was about competence. They weren't renewing. Instead, they were signing an even larger, exclusive contract with my company, Nexus. That single loss was the kill shot. It was a massive chunk of their revenue and a huge vote of no confidence from the entire industry. Their credit lines were tightened. 2 more key employees quit the next week. I heard about the emergency board meeting from an old colleague. The investors who had backed Richard were furious. They saw a rising star now in a terrifying nosedive. They saw the mass exodus of talent and clients. They saw a CEO with no answers. They saw the problem wasn't the market, the problem was him. Richard was forced out. The official announcement said he was stepping down to pursue other opportunities. The same empty corporate speak he'd used on me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The company he left behind was a hollowed-out shell. It was eventually bought by a competitor for a fraction of its former valuation. The brand I built was erased. His empire was dust. And me? My life isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. Nexus didn't just recover the ground I'd lost. We broke entirely new ground. Within 2 years, we hit $15 million in revenue. I made my key people partners. We built the company I had always wanted, based on respect, loyalty, and shared success. Looking back, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was painful, yes, but it was a catalyst. It forced me to see my own value, separate from any company. Richard thought he was getting rid of an expense. He had no idea he was creating his most dangerous competitor. He didn't get that my loyalty was one of his greatest assets. And the moment he betrayed it, he sealed his own fate. My story isn't about how to get revenge. It's about the power of self-worth. True value isn't in a title or a company name. It's in your knowledge, your relationships, and your integrity. In losing me, he lost everything. But I found a better version of myself. To anyone out there who's been underestimated, betrayed, or thrown aside, your worth is not defined by those who can't see it. Don't let their failure of vision become your prison. Rise, rebuild, and reclaim your power. Because sometimes the only way to show them what you're worth is to build your own empire from the ashes of theirs. Thanks for listening to my story. It was a long road, but it led me somewhere better. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world. Always be your own best advocate, and never let anyone else decide your value. Until next time.